Korea, there was a 22% decline of forest areas between 1990 and 2013. The Amazon forest is constantly decreasing in the past decades. This, we think, just proves that the priority of the state has never been the environment, and status quo shows brutal failure of state mechanisms we are more than proud to propose. The stance on that government is clear. We think that incentive is what plays out into real action. The state lacks incentive to utilize their money into prioritizing wildlife when they have a whole lot of different things to care about. Given that the amount of money they have is similar to each other, private entities have much stronger incentive to act on behalf of the wildlife. We think that is our stance. So clarifying the definition of private entities. By private entities, we include all things like NGOs, research and development centers on wildlife, profit-driven entities like tourism industries, zoos, etc. We think that in all these cases, they are better in protecting the environment compared to the state at the end of the day. So in my argument, first I'm going to talk about the problems of the state and why it actually lacks incentive to care about the environment in the first place. Second, I'm going to talk about the unique benefits of private entities and why they have more incentive to care about the environment at the end of the day. Before I go on to that, yes, ma'am.
Some of the most endangered species are some of the ones that are most obscure. Why does an NGO or the tourism industry have an incentive to protect those species?
I'm going to talk about that in my second argument, but just to brief it, we think that the state has less incentive than those private entities to care about those stuff. We think that they have a bunch of other things to care about, and when it is yourself that is dedicated to the cause of protecting the environment, we think that you have more incentive to care about those obscure species because you're sympathetic to the problems in the status quo. So first, what is the problems of the state? A, we think that states have different priorities. States in the status quo have so many things to care about in any countries. For instance, the economy, education, other political issues. There are a plethora of things that states take care of, and we think that therefore they need to make certain priorities over other issues. And especially in countries where endangered species are widely dominant, oftentimes these are countries that suffer from various other reasons as well. Oftentimes these are countries that are in a developing context. And when this is the case, we think that it is especially more so that they have different issues that are imminent that you need to take care of right now, like improving living conditions for the people, bettering education, bettering the economy, and industrialize your country so that you would have an international state in the international society. And also, we think that these interests also tend to clash between each other. For instance, when it comes to industrialization and having environment protected, especially when it comes to developing contexts, these governments have to inevitably make choices and prioritizations on that clashing points. No, thank you, sir. And we think that therefore, states need to prioritize its revenue in one of those areas, and oftentimes environment is much less important for these countries when they have more imminent issues to tackle upon. Also, in addition, we think that, and especially when we're talking about developing countries where they have a lack of accountability of government, we think that it is very likely that they are prone to high corruption. If that is the case, we think that it's bad for us to trust a corrupted government to really care about the environment over other issues that they have an incentive to care about. The conclusion is that the state does not have an incentive to care about the environment over other issues that are more imminent. But B, even if the state cares about the environment, it's incredibly hard for them to garner enough support and tax money to effectively protect wildlife. Let's assume that the state somehow wanted to prioritize environment issues over others. Then how do you think the citizens and the local people will react? For instance, if your family is starving because the country's economy is collapsing and the government is prone to corruption, and the government starts using your tax money to save some random endangered animal, you're going to be outraged, and the citizens are going to feel detached. The government are going to feel that the government doesn't really care about your life circumstances when there are imminent things that you should really be caring about when your government is going on and saving random animals instead of your life. And we think that that is the reason, because of the psychological effect that happens in those people's minds, it is harder to garner support from the citizens, which directly translates to having harder to garner taxpayer money to effectively protect the environment at the end of the day. We think that all in all, because they lack an incentive to do so, but even if they do so, they lack mechanism in order to carry out that action. That is the exact reason why states are ineffective in the status quo and has been failing until now. The second argument, why they have unique benefits of private entities, before that, NEP was.
The worldwide population of bees is rapidly going endangered and costs hundreds of millions of dollars to the world economy. States recognize this and take actions. Can you name an NGO that's trying to save the bees?
Okay, there are various NGOs that are trying to save bees, although I'm not an expert in NGOs. I can't name any of them like specifically interested in bees, but there are NGOs that are interested, like National Geography or the WWF, which are interested in specifically pandas, protecting pandas. We think that there are specific NGOs cater to specific issues. We simply think that the government cares, we think that the private entities have more incentives than states at the end of the day. Then second argument, unique benefits of private entities. A, NGOs and research and developing institutions. When these are the cases, we think that we have to bear in mind the question, who has the best interest at heart to preserve wildlife? These people in NGOs and research development institutions are people who feel moral motivations to dedicate their lives into protecting endangered animals. Apart from any other incentive, the most sustainable and strong incentive is that you as a human being feel sympathetic to the cause you are working for, regardless of the circumstances. Also, we think that they also receive huge amounts of funds and donations from people with aligned interests. For instance, the WWF, who works specifically to protect pandas and goes around campaigning for people to care about pandas in different regions, and also things like National Geography. They go around gaining support from the people who have similar interests, and at the end of the day, campaigning and selling their interests and making people increase their awareness about the problems that exist in the status quo, and therefore sympathetically increase the people's motivation to really care about those things. B, we also think that when it comes to institutions with profit motives, like for tourism industries, zoos, private landowners, etc., they also have better incentives. We think that there is a problem in the status quo, similar to the concept of the tragedy of commons in economics. This is a concept in which if something is shared and owned by the public, people feel less responsibility and less individual responsibility in caring about that, protecting and preserving the quality of it. And at the end of the day, nobody cares about it, and therefore the quality goes down. We think that the direct solution to that in economics is to privatize goods and make people care about them because they're directly linked with profit motive. We think that the solution also applies in this case. If the preservation of the environment is directly linked with your profit, now you care about it the most of any other things. For instance, tourism industries or zoos, they go out of business when animals die. We think that that is the utmost priority for them to protect them. Majority of their revenue will therefore have to be dedicated into maintaining the environment because otherwise they're going to go out of business, and their utmost priority is to protect environment, unlike the state. We think that therefore, all in all, in any cases, it is the utmost priority for these industries to care about the environment, which is very different from the state, and we all at the end of the day think that incentive is what creates action, that incentive only exists in private industries. We are more than proud.
I think proposition undercuts their own case from the very get-go when they predicate the majority of their material on NGOs being able to make people care about the environment and go out and take action about that care. At the point at which, under Prop's characterization, you have an apathetic population who doesn't really care about the environment and are doing these awful things, it is unclear to me why an NGO, as opposed to the state, the highest authority in the land, has more of an ability to sway those people's opinions and what they can do for their environment than an NGO that is often seen as left-wing, elitist, and Western. At the point, this debate is not just about incentive, ladies and gentlemen. This is about the impact that those incentives can have. And it's not enough for proposition to come up and say that one actor is more moral than another. They need to prove why the actions that NGOs are able to take to protect the environment are more effective or not. Something they still haven't given us a mechanism for. What am I going to do in this speech? First, a model attack of the sparse model we've gotten from side proposition so far, then refutation of everything they've said so far, finally, substantive material. 2 arguments. First, on the exclusive benefits of executive action. Second, on how to sway the hearts and minds of people. My partner is going to bring you a 3rd argument about no stone unturned. First, model. I think there are a couple of problems with their model. First, we have no metric as to what effective means. Does this mean saving one more animal today? Does this mean swaying collective action in the future? Does this mean inspiring more awareness and collective action? We need an answer from side proposition if there's any way we are able to judge this debate. Second, we still have no idea and no characterizations as to what actions both sides are taking. Are the actions that NGOs taking exclusive from state actions? If they talk about things like setting up zoos and setting up stuff like that, I think that the state is much more able to put more money into tourist industries, into zoos, into national parks, for example. With that out of the way, let's get through some refutation. First claim they give us is that states have lots of priorities and there is no incentive to focus on animals. The first thing I would contest is that this is even true. I think with growing research, like my partner tells you, how the bees are very integral to the economy of many agricultural countries, that there is a priority for governments to take. Second though, this assumes that the priorities that NGOs have are good. Armin's going to explain this more to you later, but NGOs often have an incentive to prioritize the cutest and the most marketable animals. Insofar as the state is able to do sufficient research, figure out which animals are actually needed for that country to survive, I'd say that the incentives are much better. Second thing they tell you is about how NGOs are able to, garner public support. They're able to have public awareness campaigns. First, I would contest that this is true. I think that lots of NGOs are just seen as, left-wing, liberal, and elitist organizations, and it is unclear to me why they're better able to garner public support than governments are. Second, though, I would say that their characterizations of, you care more when it's in the private sector is false. When it is your taxpayer dollar on the line, I think you care more about where that money is going and whether that money is being used to actually protect the environment. I think it's a good thing when states have to justify why they're spending money on protecting the environment. At the point at which you get massive education campaigns as to why the environment is important, I think that is at the point at which you get more public buy-in and how, that analysis really doesn't stand. Let's get into some substantive now. No, thank you. First, on the exclusive benefits of exclusive action. First thing to establish here is that some of the biggest threats to endangered species are large-scale climate events that only the government can go and regulate. What does this look like? This looks like rising temperatures driving the Great Barrier Reef into serious peril. This looks like deforestation that is ruining the habitats of sugar gliders in the Amazonian. This looks like things like poaching. This looks like droughts. This looks like invasive species being brought into countries. The important thing to note here is the only way that we can combat these things is to implement law and policies that stop this large-scale action. Governments are only able to make sure to have border control say that, look, you can't bring that species into this country. Governments are the only ones who are able to say that we can't have deforestation anymore, we can't have poaching anymore. Note here that the only thing and the most important thing that side prop can do under this realm of large-scale events is have their NGOs lobby the government to change policy. We are the government. We say that the government is better at changing those policies. Second part of this argument, though, why do states have an incentive to do this? Why do states have an incentive to actually protect the environment? Unlike the mischaracterization I think you get out of first prop. First, dealing with their best case scenario, let's say there are lots of corrupt governments who just frankly don't care that pandas are going extinct. I think there's an economic incentive for these states to care. At the point at which your industry is dependent on agriculture and the bees ain't pollinating for you no more, I think that the states have an incentive to care about that, thing. And I think that that is a sufficient reason for even the worst of governments to, in the interest of upping their GDP, maybe putting more money into their own pockets if they're really that corrupt, to care about the bees and make sure that they still do their work in pollinating. Second though, I think good states, which I think is the most impactful place for this debate, when weighing which actor is more effective, have a massive incentive to care about the environment. With the growing internal pressure that we are seeing from all the research that has come out, for cultural reasons, like the water buffalo and the African Big Five, I think that there are many reasons for which states have an incentive to prioritize the environment now more than ever, when we see large, environmental conferences going on and lots of internal and international push. Second though, hearts and minds, and I'll take a POI before this if you have one.
Now, why wouldn't private companies have a profit incentive to actively protect the extinct animals?
Okay, we're not contesting whether or not NGOs have a profit incentive to go and protect environments. This debate is about which actor is more effective at protecting it. So I don't know why this POI plays into this debate. Maybe they have a profit incentive, maybe they don't. I think that what we're arguing on side opposition is that states have better incentives. Okay, second, hearts and minds. The first thing to establish in this argument is that it is important in any attempt to combat climate change and species endangerment as a whole, you need public buy-in. Because in the long term, and I think this is where side proposition really misses the ball with a lot of their analysis, in the long term, you need a public buy-in and a collective will to solve the endangerment of species and take action as a collective to help the environment in order for any progress to accrue. Why is it important that states are the actors to do this? Why do we think that states have more influence over people? First, we think that states are the ones that set normative attitudes towards what is accepted in society and what isn't. The state's abilities to set laws about what they think are justified and not. The state's abilities to enact policy to push certain objectives that they think are legitimate and justified. It is the state that is able to tell people, we think that these are the laws that we should live by. If you don't like that, go live somewhere else. But this is the state that we are creating. These are the values that we are trying to protect. NGOs aren't able to do this for a number of reasons. First, we think that oftentimes, as I've said multiple times throughout this speech, they're seen as left-wing, they're seen as Western, they're seen as elitist. At the point at which it is a small private sector that is telling you to do something, you have much less sway than a huge government. Second though, let's take their best case scenario, the climate change deniers that just don't believe anything that the government says. First, I think that NGOs have even less sway over these people than the state does, at the point at which the state is usually someone that they have elected to represent them. But second, I would say that for the case of climate change deniers who do a lot of awful things to the environment, at least under our side, we have state policies that are able to prevent that person from doing that, as opposed to on their side, they just have a private entity that is saying, hey, maybe you shouldn't do that, we want to tell you not to do that. Very unclear as to why they would listen. At the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, this is not just a debate about incentive, and this is not just a debate about impact. The group that wins this debate is the one that is going to prove to you that they have an incentive to change and help the environment, and that the actions that those states take are the most legitimate, they're the ones that have the most sway over the most amount of people, and they're the ones that protect the environment the best. We think we do that on side opposition. Very happy to be opposed.
Spent the first half of her speech telling us why profit incentive is bad, and then spent the latter half on explaining why states have a profit incentive. We think this is a massive contradiction coming from Team Canada. We are not willing to stand by. Rather, we think we have a spectrum of private entities on Team Government. We told you from the get-go of this debate that private entities range from NGOs who have no profit incentive to like tourism industries, zoo industries, research and development centers. Their entire rebuttal was, oh, NGOs are bad. We don't think this is enough of a response to what we've given you and how each entity has an incentive and capacity to address problems. I'm going to do two things in my speech. First of all, I'm going to go over the contentions of this debate. Secondly, I'm going to give you the third argument on Team Government and explain why we give more sustainability to the environment. They asked us, what do we mean by effective? We think what it means to be effective in this debate is very clear. We think it is to create a sustainable environment at the end of the day. We think oftentimes states have a very short-term interest in the environment, even if that interest exists, and therefore they fail to create that sustainable environment. I'm going to go over to two contentions. One, who has more incentive, and two, who has more capacity. So firstly, for incentives. Their response to our entire first argument was, oh, there exists a priority. We don't think that is enough of a response because our Prime Minister already told you why even if there is some incentive, that is oftentimes outweighed by what people need. That is, we are oftentimes talking about developing countries in which things like infrastructure don't exist, in which things like jobs or basic welfare systems don't exist. In those basic cases, we think people are going to be outraged at the point that you're caring about saving another tiger. Oftentimes people don't care. We think that people have to create an incentive for government to care. Secondly, they talked about how we save the cutest animals. First of all, we would simply reject this premise and say this is an assertion. Of course, some may do this, but you have to recognize the comparative. We think that the comparative is the government and the state. The state always has to prioritize its resources and choose which animals it's going to save because it does not have enough budget. It gets worse on their side because they themselves have characterized it's about getting the international community's attention. It's about profit. If that is the case, we don't really recognize why states are so different from the incentives that they have characterized as so bad. Finally, they have talked about how states have incentive. We think even if that incentive exists, at the point that they characterize it as an economic incentive, we think that that's something that is short-term. That is, at the point that bees are no longer good for your economy, at the point that elephants are no longer good for your economy, the state no longer cares. We think environmental problems require consistent agenda. We think only private entities can do that, and more on this will come in my argument. But secondly, it's absurd environmental conferences that pressure the state to make changes, because that's the side we're standing for. We think these large international conferences on the environment come from the fact that there are private entities that care, and we think at the point that they can pressure the state to change, we think that's a good thing. We don't think that the state changes in and of itself. We think we need to create an incentive for them, and private entities are what do that. Second contention, who has more capacity? It is very interesting that they bring up problems like fees and like large-scale problems like climate change, because it is very difficult for one state to control that, because the problem isn't just in one state. It reaches out in different countries, in different regions. And we think international organizations that we have already talked about, that have headquarters in different places, in different regions, they are better at dealing with these problems, because oftentimes state cooperation with other states has to do with a lot of other problems, like diplomatic problems, like economic problems. If you have a diplomatic problem with that other state, chances are you don't want to cooperate on the environment. We change that calculus on our side because we have international organizations that are all around the world that all have the same interests, and these are the individuals and people who care and want to make that change. We think we change that calculus. Yes.
Without state support for those NGOs to come in and change policy, you're never going to get any change. Why under your side does an international organization suddenly make that state that hates another state more likely to cooperate?
We think international organizations have the capacity to work regardless of the relationship between the two states. That is, you can still continue research, you can still share research and share what is going on, regardless of whether they have a diplomatic problem or not. The comparative on their side is the state that is no longer willing to cooperate on that issue, and then nothing happens at the end of the day. They need to be comparative in this debate rather than simply attacking us for the flaws. They then mention problems like poachers. We think poachers are a problem that is going to exist on both sides at the end of the day, because we think that even if regulations are going to exist, whether it be private, whether it be public, we don't think that the number of poachers is going to change. These are people driven specifically by profit. But we think what we change is on government side, we decrease the number of people who want to become poachers, because we are the side that feeds into people that the environment is important. Finally, we are going to say that oftentimes environmental problems as of now take a quick change. That is, if the number of bees suddenly decrease into half, you need to be able to address that very quickly and flexibly. We're going to say that the state is oftentimes bureaucratic. You have to wait for that agenda to get to Congress. You have to wait for that legislation to be made. We think international organizations and private entities fix that problem quickly. Finally, they talk about how state is the one that creates the normative attitude. We're completely going to disagree on this. We think that state and attitude is shaped by what the people think. And at the point that they have not convinced the people, they are losing this debate so far. So let's go on to the third argument on sustainability. We think sustainability is particularly important in the environment, especially when you're talking about the environment. Because the environment oftentimes needs long-term solutions and long-term agendas. Let's talk the first level of analysis. What are some things that contribute to sustainability? We think that long-term interest and long-term scope and view is something that contributes to sustainability. We mean things like you have been doing this for a long time, you have specialized in that issue for a very long time, and therefore you know what's going on. We think it also means things like you are willing to share your research and development issues with other NGOs and other corporations. We think it means that arming support to the people. We think this is opposed from the short-term interest of the government, because the short-term interest of the government often means we want people's support, we want to be elected the next election, we want to do what the people want. And oftentimes what the people want isn't in the long-term interest of the environment. So how does private entities change that? First of all, we think we create cooperation across the board. As I've already said, we think that sharing research and specializing in a particular environmental issue is something that is an exclusive benefit on environmental entities and corporations, because that's something they have been doing for their entire lives. But also because it is their only interest. That is, while the state has to consider a variety of other issues, as Gail already told you, the private entity doesn't. Secondly, we think that this is an entity that's not going to change its agenda anytime soon. We think we oftentimes see see the state changing its agenda whenever the times change, whenever the people's want change. But we think that this, like entities like the National Geographic, for instance, are entities that are going to continue research and development, continue to preserve animals, regardless of what happens, regardless of what's going on and what's happening. We think that these are the long-term interests that private entities are capable of catering to, and therefore, because we don't get those long-term interests, we think we provide a more sustainable environment on our side. Thank you.
Second row.
Ladies and gentlemen, both teams in this debate agree that incentives are extremely important things to discuss. Where the two teams differ, however, is South Korea has hardly spent any time in this debate talking about why NGOs are able to have a larger impact on net than states are. So even if Team South Korea in their best case is right, that it's harder for states to act, what if on Team Canada we can prove to you that in the cases where states do act, that they have a broader impact, that they can help save more species, we think that fulfills the definition of effective, a definition Team South Korea still hasn't provided in this debate. I want to start with some clarification of something that they pushed onto us, and then move into refutation, rebuilding my partner's arguments, and then my constructive on no stone unturned. Team South Korea says that we are contradicting ourselves when we both support the profit incentive and object to it. I'd like to clarify what Team Canada's stance is. We recognize that there are cases in which states have economic or strategic objectives that can be fulfilled by protecting the environment, and that those are good at protecting species. However, states also have lots of other incentives to protect species, such as cultural incentives, such as political incentives. So they can't push us into just that one corner of the debate. But now, clash. First, Team Korea says that states lack incentives, that they have different priorities, they care about different things, and that often the same countries that have endangered species have problems with its development as well. A number of responses to this. First of all, as we pointed out, states do care about endangered species because often those are not two different incentives, they're often the same incentive. So protecting like the ability of your farmers to farm and protecting the ability of your economy to survive is the same as protecting breeds from going extinct. A really good example of this is the AFR 100 initiative that was signed during COP21, where North African nations agreed to replant 500 million hectares of forest, in large part because a lot of endangered species that prevented locusts from ruining crops were going endangered. This is the kind of political action that we think happens exclusively with states. Importantly, we showed you in Constructive why states are able to do things that NGOs simply cannot. So for example, NGOs can't change laws surrounding whether invasive species can enter a country. States can't change the pollution policy of a country. Only states can do that. Second response. Often, corrupt states themselves still have an incentive to protect the environment. Point to Madagascar, which sets up a lot of national parks to protect endangered species, in large part to preserve the fertility of their crops and prevent soil erosion that is literally causing parts of the country to sink into the ocean. So the incentive isn't the only story here. But third, we actually think it's really good that when they say that, we actually think they're wrong when they say that states need to convince people to get tax money, because states don't need explicit permission from every single person in their country, unlike NGOs, which do. I'll talk about why that's a problem in Constructive. Second argument they bring is unique benefits about how, first of all, talking about who has the best interest at heart. First of all, states have environmental ministries, they have cultural ministries, these are full of people who are extremely passionate about protecting the environment. We contend that that's exclusive to their side.
Sure.
But second of all, they say that when you give your money to an NGO, that you have an incentive to make sure it's used right. Unfortunately, there are a lot of actions NGOs can't do because they are so beholden to individual people. I'll talk about that in Constructive. Now, their long-term point, which didn't take that much time, frankly, what they did say, though, is that NGOs are incentivized to create cooperation across the board. This is untrue because in a lot of cases, NGOs are competing for the same donors and have different species that they want to protect. So this idea of grand cooperation doesn't actually exist in a lot of cases. What do they say in refutation? In response to our first point, they say state incentives are only short-term. The economic problems we identify are only solved when the species is no longer endangered. That's presumably the object of this debate. So if it's short-term to the point where they're no longer endangered, we're fine with that. But second of all, they say it's very difficult for the state to fight extinction across borders, but NGOs can. Even if NGOs have cross-border sentiment, they can't change any policies. So it doesn't really matter whether they have this sentiment or not. In response to Hearts and Minds, what they say, the state attitude is shaped by what people think. And so we need to prove how they're going to change minds. I'll take you in a second. But what they ignore is the left-wing bias that my partner points out that prevents NGOs from changing hearts and minds, which states do have the ability to influence. Yes?
If state policies were so effective, why do you think that the animal force was declining in the past decade?
Okay, it's not our burden to prove that states have throughout all of human history been amazing at preserving all species. We just need to prove that states are currently doing more to help the Amazon, like for example, putting laws against deforestation as a result of COP21 than any NGOs. Why haven't your NGOs saved the Amazon yet? It's a question I can ask you. Okay, now on to constructive, no stone unturned. My partner talked about the biggest threat to species and how things like pollution and drought and deforestation can only exclusively be tackled by states. But let's look at examples where both states and NGOs are actually capable of solving the problem, and yet only states choose to act in those scenarios. Private entities have the incentive to protect some species over others. For example, a lot of international NGOs protect pandas and gorillas, animals that are cute, that are more interesting, that we can write interesting stories about, and more often, animals that just look more like people than other animals do. They're incumbent to this emotional connection. But unfortunately, those species, while important, are often not the ones that are most at risk, are often not the ones that we need to care about the most. So what are some species that NGOs could be protecting but choose to ignore? First, species that affect specific groups of people that NGOs don't get a lot of money from. So for example, the big 5 species in the African savanna are rhinos, leopards, zebras, lions, and water buffalo. People don't tend to care about water buffalo in the developed world, but those animals are crucial not only to the ecosystem of the big 5 or of the savanna, but also to many cultures in that part of the world. This is why NGOs that were protecting the water buffalo, but Kenya constructed the Masai Mara National Park in order to protect them in the first place. These are animals that NGOs ignore. But second, plants, right? Like people really don't care about plants, which is amazing to me because plants are extremely important. There are a lot of populations of algae that are going extinct in the African Great Lakes region. That means that a lot of the wildlife that lives around those areas are going extinct as well. But nobody really cares about saving algae because we're not ready to listen to a lecture about how important they are. But governments in that region are taking action to fight things like the acidification of lake beds that NGOs are not. But third, ugly animals, right? So toads in East Africa eat a lot of mosquitoes that have malaria, but they're endangered, and NGOs don't really want to protect toads, right? This is really important. Why can NGOs structurally not deal with these species? First, as I said, people won't donate because they don't care. But second, if the NGO really wanted to make people care, they'd have to spend huge amounts of their already limited budgets on advertising and campaigning, which is a waste of the money that they would rather prioritize to species where they think they could get a bigger bang for their buck. Why is this so important in this debate, ladies and gentlemen? Because when we're talking about endangered species, we have to talk about all endangered species. We have to talk about ones that are essential to ecosystems, ones that are essential to cultures, ones that don't look good in photographs. And for those species, states, again, have the exclusive incentive to protect them in cases where NGOs cannot. Why has Team Canada taken the debate thus far? First of all, we've showed you that states have exclusive incentives that NGOs don't have to protect certain species NGOs either don't care about or can't care about. But second, we proved to you that even if it's true NGOs can act easier and can act quicker, they don't have the means with which states do in order to protect species in the most effective way possible. What we face today in the world is the endangerment of species that are essential to human lives. The team that wins this debate is the team that proves which different actor is better at solving that problem. On Team Canada, we think it's states. For that reason, we're proud to host.
It is very unfortunate that Team Canada is characterizing as their conflicts, as these states are so effective at enforcing these laws. We have clearly told you from the get-go about the instances of the Amazon, about all these developing countries where the most endangered species are focused in those areas. But what happens is that these governments do not feel accountable to protect those species, and they're prone to be corrupt. They're not really responding well to those environmental changes because they do recognize that those conflicting interests like economic development or education are somehow more important and more should be established more in that sense. We don't want them to draw a characterization in which this is a world where all people are well educated, it's well economically developed, and the country has much interest in those environments to protect the bees or the farmers. We don't think that that should be the context of today's debate. But even if we do engage, we also have to accuse that they only dealt the context about the NGOs. We have clearly told you how these companies who can put more proportion of effort, more proportion of revenue to the environment exist, that they do exist by the profit. They are profit oriented in which they have much more incentive and also can put more proportion of effort into that issue in the first place. They have never dealt that. The only thing we heard is that NGOs are left-wing, that's not popular, so people won't support it. We don't think that they can simply stand by that stance. Now, directly moving on to our two clashes. Firstly, do the specialized private entities have more incentive to protect the creatures? Secondly, which side can ensure better preservation of endangered animals? Moving on to our first clash regarding about all these incentivization. So we have repeatedly told you from the get-go, from our PM, that even in the hands of the most resourceful entity or the most powerful entity, you can never ensure that a certain action will actually be put into practice. We have clearly told you that the core factor to achieving the actual effective preservation of these animals is the actual intent of these entities. And we have clearly heard from side opposition that the only thing that they gave us is that these countries do have incentive, which without any kind of analysis that they would why these countries would like to prioritize environment over any kind of economic development or whatnot. But also we heard that if they have incentives, that will be economy, which means that that's actually better on our side when these private entities are solely dedicated to environment and also profit oriented. In that sense, we think that these are the companies that can actually put more long-term efforts in preserving the economies, the environments, and also these preserved animals in order to get profit, in order to get their profit out of that project. We also told you that the purpose of existence is very important of these two different entities. We have clearly told you that these profit-oriented entities or even NGOs are solely dedicated to environmental protection, whereas these governments are dedicated to the betterment of human life, meaning that these prioritization always changes under their side. We also told you about the function of these entities are very different. We have told you that these NGOs or these companies that are driven by profit are conducting various researches on rare animals. They do have much more time and effort to do so, put lots of effort to preserve those animals, and also to increase public awareness by going over these international conferences. Versus their side is that these governments have hordes of other stuff to do, probably more focused on education or economic development, which may form a direct conflict with environment preservation. And in that sense, we think that we're the one who can actually sustain these kind of environments, but also put more proportion of efforts and revenue into these projects, which just seems that this intent can actually have more chance to translate into actual preservation. So if they're true that the government is so incentivized to protect these environments and do have more power to do so, why would the Amazons in Brazil are actually still under threat of deforestation? Why would the government actually try to gain those economic benefits out of this deforestation? Because even when they are really so concerned about environment, we don't think that that's what's happening under those cases. And we rather say under our case, when the land is privately owned by a company or with profit interest, those trespassing will actually be illegal, meaning that if people are trying to pouch endangered animals or trying to get into the land and do something, we actually think that if those people get caught, they also go to court. We see no meaning why actually that this should be only somehow done by policy when it's not actually even enforced by the state in the first place. So we have clearly told you under the most context where most of the endangered species are in Brazil and Africa, these laws are not enforced well in the very first place, but also people do really lack awareness and interest in these cases because these people do not really have time and effort to care about these environments when food are not on their table. We think that on these cases, absolutely the government will also take side of the citizens, will not actually try to put more awareness or try to persuade their people. We actually think that the government will be much more less incentivized or interested in these environmental problems because we have clearly told you governments are not there to sway people. We think the governments are swayed by the people. In that sense, that's the reason why governments are already concerned about citizens' outrage, and also that's why governments are moving on their popularist ideas. We think that people don't care, as they said, the whip said, that PPO said, that people don't care about water buffalo. In that sense, we can't imagine what will happen when the government is trying to say we're going to protect the bees. we're going to use our tax to protect these buffaloes. We don't think that that will absolutely be in a very optimistic way in which the citizens also accept those situations from happening. We rather said that the response that we got from Team Canada is that firstly, the states also have economic incentive by tourism or whatnot. Exactly. We think that that is much more achieved under our case because tourism industries is solely dedicated in gaining profit out of tourism. But secondly, even if these states are incentivized for somewhat different reasons, we think that firstly, that really leads to deprioritization of their tax. But also secondly, like who can realistically put more investment on saving these fees? We think absolutely the state, they might put some projections or some investments into those projects, but we don't think that will be effectively done enough so that they can really preserve and really try to gain awareness out of the public. Yes, sir.
The Uganda government is in the developing world, but has also pledged more money than any other nation on earth to protecting bonobos for purely like reasons of cultural
Okay, we're not trying to say that the government is not doing anything about environment. We're comparing the two worlds in which the government, the only actor, can really deal about these environmental problems when they also have to put lots and lots of money into economic development and also education. Versus, we're the one when the government also may do something, but we think that absolutely these private-oriented people can actually, and these organizations can do much more than the government in proportion, and is much more sustainable because their sole goal is to actually protect these environments and to do their best under their whole heart. So we think in that sense, this really draws a very different comparison, and we think that especially with on the case, they didn't really develop into this space regarding all these developing countries. Absolutely, we take the upper hand. Now moving on to the second clash, which side can ensure better preservation of these endangered animals? So this was pretty much well dealt in our previous speakers because we saw that, we actually did tell you that better protection and better protection power does not directly translate to power to make the law. We have clearly told you that this also has a lot to do with the government's calculus. We actually told you that if the government is swayed by the people, that they can't invest things on environment, then firstly, they don't have a reason to do so. But secondly, we have clearly told you that these private entities can also buy lands, and also we think that there are lots and lots of ways how they can actually preserve the animals. But we have clearly told you about the problem of awareness. We think that the citizens, in order to not be very outraged and also do support these kind of environmental acts, should be aware by all these kind of problems. But we rather think that this cannot be done by the government if they're not really solely dedicated to that problem. We see lots of entities like the WWF, which also came to Korea and actually did make a very, very good conference in which why we need to be aware of panda preservation and what we need to do so. We think that the government don't have any incentive to do so. But we also say that regarding the point that they told us, the government, if we only make private entities do so, they will only get the cutest animals. Firstly, we deny this assertion because we also have lots of research purposes, and that in that cases we think that entities will have much more incentive to go on for these obscure animals as well. But secondly, you are the same. We think that if they're trying to promote tourism and gain economic benefits out of it, we actually think that the government is more prone to only protect these cutest animals or those most prettiest animals or whatnot. For these reasons, we think that absolutely these private entities have much more revenue and much more power and proportionate effort to put and actually do preserve and increase public air awareness. For these reasons, we're very proud to propose.
Thank you. Before I get into my two areas of clash, I want to start off with a couple of strategic notes to clarify how this debate has gone so far because it's pretty messy. First of all, to clarify, neither team needs to prove that the other actor is harmful or that the other actor is bad. What both teams need to prove is that they are better at achieving a certain goal than the other actor. The problem with both teams so far is that what opposition has been doing is we've been saying that there are unique things the state can do that NGOs can't. The case of proposition has been there are lots of things that NGOs can do that strengthen what states do or that compel them to do better things. But they haven't proven to you things that NGOs or private institutions can do without the existence of a state. They need to do more on that. Second of all, though, there has been a huge misuse of empirical claims and analysis by Team Proposition down this debate. They've kept on pushing. Look, the environment is being ruined now, species are losing their habitats now, states haven't done anything to stop them. Not only have they not responded to my second speaker's question about why NGOs haven't done anything, but the key point to point out here is a lot of the reasons why our environment is being destroyed is because of individual actions and individual unwillingness to change patterns. So what you should weigh most heavily then is which actor is better able to change how the public feels about the environment and how it interacts with it. Third thing to note, Proposition has been operating under the assumption that we can protect all animals in this debate, and you should judge this debate based on, do we save all animals? That's not true. It is impossible to save every single animal that is on the endangered list. There are some animals that will always be protected because they're well known, like the pandas that are really cute. What we have to talk about are the animals that are really important to specific cultures, to specific groups of people that may not be well publicized. Those are the groups of animals that you should care more about, necessitating that there's a trade-off and not everyone can be saved. Two areas of clash. Firstly, I'm going to look at the incentives of both organizations, and second of all, I'm going to look at their capacity to actually protect animals. Looking firstly at incentives, I want to deal with the three types of states that Proposition has talked about we have to look at in this world. The first type are those that are the developing world countries that are corrupt. The second type is the type of state that doesn't care because they have too many priorities. And the third type is the state that wants to care, but they have backlash from the public. Looking firstly at the corrupt, developing world state that they want to talk about. The first thing to point out here is that they have a whole third argument about how international organizations should be working with NGOs and non-for-profit organizations to push them to do good things. This is a concession that the state has the ability to enact changes, and moreover, that these states are able to enact changes. They're not all just corrupt and unable to put in place laws. Second of all, if these governments are so corrupt and they're so against protection against the environment, private entities can't do any benefit as well because they're likely to crack down on any efforts that they may have. So they don't claim any of their benefits. The key thing to note here is they actually can do more harm than they do good, because these governments may see it as infringing on their sovereignty when foreign institutions come in and say, we need to protect species that you have deemed aren't important enough to protect. That could lead to the government cracking down on the eco-friendly rancher that they otherwise would have let be. So they don't do any benefit, they only do harm in the most extreme cases. Let's look at the second case, where the state doesn't care because it has more important priorities like healthcare and the economy. And they banked a large part of their case on this characterization of the state. The first thing to note here is that both NGOs and companies, as well as the state, have priorities. So the question isn't one actor prioritizes and the other doesn't, it's who has the better priorities. There are two different types of endangered species that we're looking at. Those that are very well known and those that are more obscure. Our claim on opposition is that the priority of NGOs will always go to the ones that are well known, to the ones that have really important, like emotional feelings that we can ascribe to protecting that species. The thing is that states, while they do have priorities, are more concerned about as they conceive the big picture items, like how those species fit in to the economic well-being of those states, and to the healthcare and to the survival of their own people. So to the state, it doesn't matter whether or not they're obscure or well-known, it just matters that they're an important species to protect. But second of all, they concede when they make this argument about prioritization, that the state cares about big picture items like healthcare and the environment and the economy. The reason why this is important is because when I tell you that you can't protect every single animal, what matters most is the fact that states are willing to put in place things like anti-pollution laws, deforestation laws, because even if they don't target the specific species that they want to protect, those obscure species, at least they put in place laws that means fewer animals will be on the endangered list in the long run. That's a huge benefit that we get from states. Let's look at the third characterization, which is the state tries, but there's backlash from the angry public because the taxes are being spent on animals. First thing to note, there's tension in their case and their characterization of what the public thinks. Note that their entire mechanism is people being willing to give their money to NGOs and to zoos and to private companies. If people really don't like giving up their money to protect the animals, they can't get any benefits either. Here's the difference between the two teams. We've told you it is much more plausible in characterization that states will have to care about the degradation of their environment. And even if people are unhappy about it, the state has to put in place a campaign to educate people on why they're spending their taxpayer dollars in a certain way. That's what's going to get people to change their minds about the fact that the environment doesn't matter now, it's a long-term effect. Second tension to note here. The mechanism that we got from the first speech was people only care about something when they have a stake in it being protected. That's why zoos work, they claim, because when you lock them up and you have an incentive to see that zoo flourish, it's when you care about their sustainability. Why isn't it equivalent to say that when your taxpayer dollars go towards funding the protection of these animals, you also won't care? So we haven't been given any reason for proposition as to why there would be severe backlash from the public, and even if there is, why the state wouldn't have an incentive to try and downplay that to convince them that protecting the environment is good. Let's look at the exclusive benefits now that proposition gives you, because they need to prove to you that NGOs can do things that the state can't. The key one that we get from Team Prop is that NGOs have a lot of money, they're able to join partnerships, and they're able to have a larger capacity than states that are basically restrained by their budgets. So the problem with their argumentation here is it's all just assertions about what states can and cannot do. Like, we haven't been told by proposition why a state can't create a committee, for example, that focuses on a specific area of their country, a specific geographical region, like aquatic life, terrestrial lifestyle. Like, they haven't proven to us why those aren't things that states can do as well. But second of all, the key difference between states and these NGOs is that states can run at a deficit. They do have much larger budgets, but they're able to do things that might be unprofitable for the sake of protecting that species. It looks like bringing that one really rare red panda into a space where it's safe, even if, protecting it might be costly, even if you might not make money off of it, because you know that if that panda dies out, the other animals that eat it will die out as well, and your people won't have food coming up in the next few months. So they haven't been able to tell you, even though their case is hung on incentives and the unique incentives of NGOs, why beyond that, they're able to have specific benefits that states can't reach. Panel, it is so unfortunate that we can't save every single animal on the earth and the ocean today. And what that means is we need to prioritize the actor who is able to put in place laws that will ensure that fewer animals will have to be in the position in the future, that fewer animals will ever have to see their names on that list. And the only actor who can do that is the actor that doesn't care if they're cute. The actor doesn't care about the photo ops, but the actor that cares about the well-being of their ecosystems, society, and the people. Thank you.
This debate today largely does revolve around what you think about the word effective, a word that Team South Korea declined to properly and fully define from the outset of this round. On Team Canada, we think we gave you a very reasonable metric to judge this debate. First, what actor is best able to protect a broader scope of species, but also which actor is better able to have the most impact in cases where they do choose to act. This is because at the end of the day, the problem both teams are trying to solve is the same, in the endangerment of species and the fact that it is incumbent on us as a society to do something to solve that problem. I'm going to look at two questions in this reply. First, which actor has the better incentive? And second, which actor has the better means? First, do NGOs or states have better incentives? On Team Canada, we told you that states have plenty of incentives that inform different actions on how they treat endangered species. On the one hand, there are economic incentives that are related to crop yield, that are related to the cost of artificial pollination, but also that there are cultural motivations, environmental motivations, or simply the desire to protect the species because, much like NGOs, there are plenty of very devoted, very committed people in states who want to make sure, for example, that the bonobos don't go extinct. On Team South Korea, we heard that states care a ton about a bunch of other things first, and so their incentive is flimsy, whereas NGOs are more steadfast. There's a few problems with this. First, down the bench, Team Canada showed that this is simply empirically untrue, that even in the developing world, where Team South Korea said this problem was the worst and where they had the best ground, that it is actually in those places where things like the AFR 100 initiative have occurred, where things like the construction of national parks in Namibia and Madagascar have occurred, things that South Korea did respond to. But also, all South Korea then has at the end of this are the specific states that really just don't care about the environment at all. Why is that not enough for Team South Korea to win this round? First, never did Team South Korea prove why NGOs would be more effective specifically in those cases, but But second, as our third speaker pointed out in Team Canada, this debate is not about which actors are capable of doing harms in certain instances. For example, there are tons of corporations that pollute the environment, that cause species to go extinct. But this debate is about when those two actors are trying to solve the problem, which of them is more effective. Now, South Korea also says that NGOs have the incentive to use the money of their donors well. But Team Canada showed you that there's actually a dark flip side to that coin, where they're incumbent to the whimsy of individual, especially very wealthy donors, who often don't have the right priorities in mind. All of these reasons should show you, ladies and gentlemen, that the actor with the better incentive is in fact states around the world. But second, which actor has the better means? And Team Canada was, I think, correct in showing you that this was actually the most important question in the round, because this round is about saving species. Team South Korea says that NGOs can complement government actions and form partnerships, but also that corporations have a lot of money and can set up things like private zoos and tourism. On Team Canada, what we did from the outset was show you that the most important threats that are causing endangerment are things like climate change, things like pollution, things like flooding, and that is in order to truly combat endangered species, we need to be able to solve those problems. And that states have the sole ability to do things like change laws, change what species can enter and exit the country, change, like for example, how much like the country of Australia pollutes and how that affects endangered species on the Great Barrier Reef. Meaning, even if it's in order to win, South Korea have to prove either why this is not the most important threat, why NGOs can do it too, or why states will never act. But Team South Korea failed to prove any of these three things, which is why states at the end of this debate clearly emerge as having the better means as well. So clearly, states are better equipped to help more species and to help them more than NGOs or private bodies ever could. And it's for that reason that we're so proud to oppose.
Debate should come down to very simple questions. First, who has more incentive? Second, who has more need? We agree with their questions. So firstly, let's talk about incentive. But notice that you need to win the incentive first. Because at the point that we tell you that states don't have the incentive, it doesn't matter if states have the capacity to or not. We think oftentimes it means that states are not willing to act. At the point that you win this first question, we think government team already wins. So let's look at why we win that question. We told you from the get-go of this debate that states don't have the incentive because they have a lot of other issues at hand. We finally heard a response from Deputy Leader of Opposition saying, oh wait, no, it's the same incentive as developing the economy. It's the same incentive, so it's okay. What do you even mean by that? We told you from our side that it oftentimes means that you have to choose between two different things. It is either you build a school in which you can educate more people, or you save that tiger. It is either you build infrastructure so that you can have more people go around, or you save that bee. We don't think that they have explained to you why you can do both. We have also explained why oftentimes it would mean that states would have a short-term interest and why that's a bad thing. No response. But they tried to hinge this debate on, oh, we're only going to save cute animals. You are the side that said the state wants this because of tourism. Apparently, cute animals are good for tourism. They need to still start getting comparative. But we told you we guarantee a spectrum on our side. Because oftentimes, sure, sometimes tourist industries are only going to care about the cute animals, but oftentimes research centers place value in lots of different animals. We are the side that gave you a spectrum of different private entities with different incentives to do different things and save the environment. They are the side that simply said no. But opposition whip came up and changes their entire stance and says, oh, it's okay because oftentimes we have different priorities and the state can do more. Her point basically was that the state has an incentive to protect something that is obscure, which was a new point by the way. But we think that when they want to protect the animals, the state is incentivized to do something that shows their electorate, to do something that their electorate will care about. So at best, their alternative of the state is not much better than ours. She also told us about how the state can oftentimes run the business. I'll tell you more about this in the second part about capacity. Because the other important part of this debate is about capacities. The Deputy Leader of Opposition said, oh, it's okay because the government can do whatever they want and NGOs can't because they're accountable. No, they can't, Mr. Madam Speaker. We don't think that the government can do whatever they want. We oftentimes told you that the government is incentivized to care about what the people care about. But we think that while NGOs are accountable to people who care about the environment, states are accountable to all kinds of people. That means people who don't care about the environment. That means people who want to prioritize education. And that is why we told you states are a worse actor. We furthermore told you why you create backlash on your side. Because at the point that the state is using that money to protect the environment, now the people can go, okay, the state is doing something that I don't want to do. This is not what I support. And now I don't want to support movements that support the environment. But finally, this debate ultimately comes down to unique benefits and parts. We told you about the unique benefits of things like research and development, how this is something that can be shared even when states may have disputes. No response. We told you that these entities have an interest in making sure animals are alive, monitoring them, preserving them. Minuscule things that oftentimes the state simply cannot care about. Their idea was, oh, state has executive power. You can't just tell us about the unique benefits of the state. You need to tell us why that unique benefit of the state contributes to saving the environment. And at the point that they have only brought up pollution legislation and all, we think it's pretty much too late. We are the side that told you that we are for consistent saving of the environment. They are the side that have failed to defend the state that has short-term interest and is often guilty. Therefore, we take this debate.